time to do this interview. This is part of my blog series on internal communications. I've been talking to a lot of thought leaders on employee communications. There are about 30 interviews already done, and thank you so much for doing this. Before we start, it'll be great if you could just introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Okay, thank you for having me. First of all, it's a pleasure doing this. And I think it's really important for the communications community to learn from each other and, kind of progress from there. So I'm Bhavana Kuka, and I head communications for a company called Falabella India, which is a South American company set up very newly in India. It's about 2 years here in India, but it's a well-established organization,
Right.
integrated retail organization in South America.
Fantastic. Okay, that's
Yeah.
great, and it's really good to hear the perspective from the retail industry. So I think that'll be a great thing to know. So
Yep.
let me start by asking you the first question. How do you define? What's your definition of internal communications?
For me, internal communications is almost like the North Star, right? Because it's a very defining kind of a platform which kind of gives direction,
Hmm.
but it gives us direction in a way that is relevant
Hmm.
and in the way which is multi-layered and
Right.
multi-hued as well.
Correct.
So for me, it's almost like a North Star and something which is very, very integral to an organization.
Got it. Got it. And if I were to ask you, how does it get practiced? So, in from a practical standpoint, how does it get implemented in your organization or any of the organizations you worked at?
Um, I think, the key to internal communications is to first understand your audience, right?
Right.
You know who you're interacting with, who you're communicating with, because I think the messaging, contextual messaging and relevant messaging to each of these audiences is very important.
Got it.
Any organization today, for example, is you have freshers coming in, you
Right.
have early professional hires, EPH that you call, or you
Right.
have seasoned people. And
Right.
again, it's again divided into, you have folks in who are hardcore techies,
Right.
right? And you have folks who are on the research side or data analytics, you know.
Right.
So
Sure.
there are many nuances to the kind of people who work in any organization,
Correct.
given the
Correct.
seniority level, so many facets to it, right? But
Hmm.
I think communicating and looking at the relevant messaging
Hmm.
for each of these audiences is very important.
Fantastic. Okay.
So I think that is key.
Great. So what I hear you say is that there is the audience which you need to look at. You need to look at the messaging, the content. You need to look at the kind of environment that you operate in, and all that forms part of the implementation process which you would ideally follow.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so if I were to ask you to kind of reflect on, say, if you could share one example of a campaign or some kind of an initiative, it need not be in the current organization, it could be any of the organization you worked in earlier, where there was a particular challenge for internal communications. How did you kind of overcome that? What is the solution? What is the impact from it?
Okay, so I can give you two examples, right? One in my current organization, of course, we have a very young, vibrant kind of a crowd. We
Hmm.
don't have that many employees yet because we're still growing.
Right.
But what we found that when we've not been doing too many campaigns because we've just started out. We had very
Right.
few employees. We've grown to that
Right.
extent that we can do some campaigns. So we were
Correct.
looking at
Hmm.
employee referral, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so what happens is in a lot of established organizations, this is a pretty much a back-end process. We have a tool, da da da, and all of that.
Right.
But in a company like ours, where a lot of people are still struggling to even pronounce the name properly,
Right.
sometimes, or even communicate what is it that we do. We are
Correct.
so new, our employees are new, but
Right.
and what we also do as a benefit to our employees is teach Spanish
Oh,
because
okay.
we are a Spanish company, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we had a first campaign in Spanglish.
Oh,
So we
nice.
use some really often used words, and a lot of our folks are learning Spanish at different levels. We
Hmm.
have some seasoned Spanish speakers, and you have people like me who are struggling with a few words. But We have so we had a campaign in Spanglish rather,
Right.
and we had a fabulous response because
Great.
we taught some really cool slang language. We kind of used that to communicate, and
Right.
so the engagement was high, the excitement level was high, and also the number of referrals, which was the ultimate objective, right?
Okay.
So that was one campaign, and one was with my previous organization that I worked with. It's a very,
Mhm.
very large enterprise,
Mhm.
and I think for the first time, what happens is they all come to India because of the numbers.
Right.
Sometimes it also says, "Hey, let's do this. Let's get a lot of people," and I'm
Mm.
sure India will do a great job because you have so many people working out of India. But what they
Right.
don't understand is it relevant?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
the kind of numbers you're looking at, because the people
Right.
who like this subject is probably a subset of that large number, right?
Mm.
And I think after a lot of back and forth, we were able to convince them that
Mhm.
more sometimes it's the quality rather than
Right.
quantity.
Right. Right. Okay.
You know, so this was a series of online webinars that we had with
Right.
live interaction, etc.
Okay.
And while it's great to engage, but you
Mm.
also need relevant audience to engage.
Exactly. Okay.
You know,
Got it.
so that was a pretty challenging one, but which I think we were quite successful in that.
So if I would ask you any of those campaigns, what are some of the metrics you looked at in terms of, measuring the effectiveness of those campaigns?
See, in the previous organization, we used a tool called Unica.
Okay.
Okay, so which actually tells you how many people actually opened the mail,
Got it. Got it.
right? It
Yeah.
doesn't go to the extent that how many people, how much time did they spend reading the
Yeah.
mail, etc. Right?
Right. Right.
But some of the other more basic measurements I feel is the open rates. You know, how many people just opened the mails,
Hmm.
and uh, for example, downloaded a particular video or a
Got it.
particular uh,
Got it.
PPT or whatever. So you know by
Sure.
the downloads, etc. Or for
Sure.
example, if it's a webinar, it was just the participation numbers itself.
Exactly. Okay. So it's basically the action or the kind of the momentum which the campaign takes. So you kind of know by the numbers whether people are really engaging or not, right? That's
Correct,
what
correct.
you
And we
okay.
also do pulse surveys, right? Mini pulse, basically, especially during webinars. You have polls which come up, and
Right.
then post that you have a feedback kind of a thing which comes up. So I think those are all good indicative
Okay.
tools for us. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, what is the biggest challenge, according to you, which communicators face today in the industry or in the domain?
One of the things is probably over communicating,
Okay.
or because a lot of times, or maybe lack of platforms. For example, I
Mhm.
have an email that I can send out. I
Mm.
can send out a video, for example, or a podcast,
Right.
for example,
Right.
or I can develop an app and put stuff on it, right?
Got it.
But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, what is the best way to so a lot of it gets spam. I mean,
Yeah.
be taken as spam.
Right.
Right, and that is a big challenge because a lot of employees still say, "Oh, the comms team is sending out stuff again, or the HR
Right.
team is sending out stuff again." So we're getting spammed. And how do you kind of get them to, you know, uh, maybe compartmentalize it, say that this is also critical. It's
Mm.
not coming in the way of your delivery, but
Right.
take some time out to go through it as well.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So basically, what he's saying is information overload, and of course, the fact that people can choose not to accept those messages at the stage.
Yeah, yeah.
And what would you call, I mean, according to you, what's the biggest opportunity that you see as an internal communicator?
See, for me, I'm a firm believer that every employee is a brand advocate.
Fantastic. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really today's world. It's no longer top down communicating.
Correct.
It's a peer
Yeah.
to peer, and especially in the tech world, right? If you go to the tech world, if you look at any forums, the minute they hear gyan, they all run away, right?
Yeah.
So it is, how do I then leverage how do I first of all get or groom certain peers to be influencers within
Right.
the system itself, right?
Got it.
Internally itself, how can I identify certain influencers who
Right.
will kind of resonate better with the employees, for example?
Right.
you know So I think those are critical things. We have to be cognizant of the fact that, I mean, as you know, you have your millennials and then you have your Gen
Mm.
Z. They all
Right,
come with different sets of attitudes. They're
right,
all digital natives. So how do
correct.
I actually speak with this particular audience as well?
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I'm also a great believer in that. My question to you is, I mean, you hit upon a very interesting point about the influencers. So, is there a way which you can tangibly figure out who your influencers are?
Yeah, so we did a very sorry.
No, no problem.
We did a very informal group discussion within
Sure.
my current organization, and
Right,
I just wanted to know, what makes you happy in this organization?
right.
What makes you eager to come to work every day? And some of the answers that I got was like an eye opener, right?
Mm,
But then that gave me an opportunity to identify people who are excelling in their work, but are
fantastic.
also creating that level of influence over others at
Got it.
certain position to be able to
Okay.
do that externally or internally.
Fantastic. Okay. So while you are, there's a lot of thought, discussion about how internal communication is probably a bit distant from the business. So is there a way which, how can internal communicators add more value to the business? What can they do to really get more integrated, more connected? So what do you suggest? What are your recommendations?
Internal communication cannot be very different from what your business vision is. It all
Right.
feeds in. Whatever you do for internal communication, at the end of the day, it
Mm,
should align with what the overall vision is of the organization, of the CEO, of the
mm,
leaders that you work with.
mm,
Right? It has
mm.
to be aligned.
Got
Otherwise,
it.
you're doing something in silo, which is very futile and not the
Right.
outcome that you want to drive.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Got it. And a lot of people want to join communications. I think there's a lot of these mass communication schools, and there are a lot of people who want to join. So for youngsters who want to make a career for themselves in this domain, what's your advice and what kind of skills do they need to excel in internal communication specifically?
I think digital, you can't escape from digital today. So
Right.
you need to have that basic level of understanding of digital, right?
Got it.
How do you leverage the platforms that are there and how do
Sure.
you optimize it for
Mm.
your benefit? The other
Right.
thing is storytelling.
Right.
If you don't know storytelling, you have to learn it,
Got it.
right? And no matter what channels you use to tell your story, but you
Yeah.
need the hook, you need to be able to tell a compelling story, you need to be
Got it.
able to make it relevant to your audience. So I think
Right.
that is the second important thing. And the
Sure.
third one is never take your eye off from your outcome that you're
Mm.
driving, because at
Okay.
the end of the day, when you have to go back and say why was a particular campaign successful and what did you achieve, and therefore how it aligns back to your own strategy,
Right.
if it does not, then it's not a good job done.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of other questions which I had, and again, because of the fact that you are a woman communication leader in your organization, now there are a lot of women out there also who want to, get better at what they do. So I know there are different kinds of challenges. What is your advice for young women who want to think about this domain, think about becoming good at communication, think about engaging better in the organization? What's your advice? And it's not really related to communication in any way, but what do you think they should be doing differently?
Uh, I think what is important is if you want to progress in any career, right? Even if you're a woman or whatever, first you have to understand what is the next level you want to reach. Therefore, what
Right.
are the skill sets that I need and I don't have right now to
Right.
enable me to reach the next level?
Got
But
it.
I think it's also important to find mentors,
Right.
whether it's internally or externally, to
Right.
help you be able to achieve that.
Got it.
See, there are two types of mentors, right? One
Mm.
is which who will help guide you in a professional manner.
Right.
The other kind of mentor is help you develop softer skills, maybe, or
Got it.
leadership skills, maybe, to you
Right.
know, um, whatever else it could be, not specifically in your domain, but maybe work-life
Right.
integration for women. How do I balance that better so that
Right.
I can go after my career? I think that it's important to find mentors who you can align with and work with.
Hmm.
And the third thing I think what you should do is shadow. What is the next role you want
Right.
to do? So can I shadow
Right.
somebody who's currently doing that role and see if that's actually for me or not? And there are
Okay.
simpler things to do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to go out of your way. You can identify certain people to kind of
Right.
work with you on this.
Fantastic. And now with this pandemic going on, COVID-19, and there are other crises happening. So what's your, from an internal communication standpoint, what is the mindset communicators should have, and how should we advise leadership in terms of how they should approach communication at this stage?
Um, the lot of communications that I do is employer branding, right?
Right.
Whether it's external or internal, it's all about employer
Correct.
branding. But I think
Right.
COVID has given a different dimension to communication in the sense
Right.
that it has changed the tone of voice that you use. Probably, it's become
Hmm.
more empathetic,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I
Right.
think today we should just be a little bit more sensitive about certain things which are not in your control. But
Correct.
for example, if you take a typical Indian household, it's a woman who ends up doing half the stuff. And I think there should be that level of sensitivity to say that, hey, there's a house to look after, there may be kids to look after,
Right.
plus
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
workload. So to give that flexibility to be able to navigate around all of these things,
Got it. Got it.
you know.
Okay. And the last question to you. So what is a trend that you spot in communications in general? Anything that you're seeing or read recently, maybe a research report which strikes you?
Uh, I think it's all new forms of digital right now. And I think COVID has really turned that around for everyone,
Got it.
right? We all have to figure out new ways of working. And
Hmm.
in this new reality, what is going to be the norm? For example, if you look at IBM's flagship event, Think,
Right.
it's gone digital for the first time in God knows
Right.
how many years,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
It's all online, it's all digital.
Yeah.
Some of the agencies that I work with closely who handle on ground events
Right.
have to rethink their strategy and say, what can I offer digitally now?
Correct.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and so how can I keep the level of engagement, because it's very easy to drop off or to
Yeah.
switch off or doing virtual stuff, right? But how
Yeah.
do I keep that level of engagement up? I think that's a new challenge, and that is something which most people will be looking at in the near
Hmm.
future at least.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. So thank you so much. This has been really fantastic. I'm sure the audience would love all the messages that you shared. Thank you again for taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for speaking with me. Yeah.
No problem. Pleasure. Just hold on.